Hello, I'm Sam, and today I will present you the Pundit PL-200 and my works on this instrument. So, this instrument is used to measure wave velocity created by pairs of transductors like that. So for me, I have two pairs of transductors, the P wave 1 and the S wave 1, and it can measure the velocity in materials like that. So you have to connect the transductor you want to the Pundit. For that, it's very simple. You just have to put this cable behind the Pundit like that, and then you have two cables that you connect to the transductors. So once you've connected the transductor to the Pundit, it looks like that, and you can now measure the velocity of the material you want. So here is the home menu of the Pundit. You have 6 buttons, so one to shut down the device, one with information, so information about the transductor, the device, and also document to use the Pundit in different language. Here you have a button to see information about the system, like the date, the power, the sound, etc. Here you have the Explorer. It is where you can create files and save your measures. Here you have the button of the settings where you can choose your transductor, calibrate it, and also choose other parameters during your measures. And finally, here you have the button where you can measure what you want with different modes of measure and different parameters that you can change and that I will explain. So, before making a measure, you always have to calibrate your transductor. So, you choose your transducer. We have different transductors. For me, I had the exponential one and the S-wave one. So, you choose the one, and then you click to zeroing transducer, and here. So to calibrate this pair of transducers, you will need this calibration rod that you will put here, like that. Then you click here and you apply a force, but not very much, and then you wait. Once the calibration is done, you click here, and it's saved. Now, if you want to change the transducer to another, for example the S1, you have, of course, to change here the connected transducer, then zeroing transducer, and the sample of the S1 of the S-wave transductor is this one. You just have to put like that. Like that. Be aware to get the cables alienated when you make a measure or when you calibrate it for the S-wave transductor. Then you put a pressure and you click here and you wait for the calibration. So now that you have calibrated the transducer, you will need first to go to the Explorer and create a file where you want to save your measure. For example, I have many files, but if I want to create another, you click here, you choose the name of the new folder, and then you have to click on this folder to get your measure saved in this folder. Also, if you want to copy or delete a measure that you made, you just have to click here. Here you can copy, here you can cut, and here you can delete. So I want to copy and put it in another file. So here, you just have to click here, and now you have the same file. And if you want to delete it, like that, and like that. So now that I chose the folder where I want to save the measure, I can click here and go now to make a measure. So in the measure mode, you have many modes of measure that I will explain later to you. But first, here you have a button to choose the name of your file that you will save later in the folder that you choose. Here you can zoom. Here you can choose automatic cursor or manual cursor when you make a measure. Here it is to start the measure. Here you can take a picture and it will save in the folder that you choose. And here stop the measure. You have a button of parameters which is the same in the main menu. So you can choose the transducer, you can also zeroing again the transducer. These two buttons are determining when you want to stop the measure. For example, this button stop the measure when the signal is stable, and this button stop the measure when you put the square button. In the right, you can choose your voltage or your gain. Notice that for the S-wave transducer, the voltage can only be 50 or 100, and the gain can go to 1 to 10,000. But for me, the gain that I used the more often was 1000 or 500. Notice that if you choose the exponential transducer, that is the P-wave transducer, here you can up to 402 voltage. So here you have information about the device like the battery, the time, and the transducer that you chose. So I will go back to the S-wave transducer. And finally, here you have the mode that you can choose. There are three modes of measure. You have the basic one, the special one, and the multi-measurements, but I don't know how they work because I didn't use them, and I think it's for other samples than the one that I had. Here for the special mode, I only use the E-Modulus that I will explain later, and the basic mode, you have the transmission time that measure, of course, the time. Here you can put your cursor. The distance where you need to put the velocity of the wave in the sample that you are measuring, and the pulse velocity where you need to know the distance of the sample that you are measuring, and here the compressive strength. So all these modes of measure are based on the transmission time, and then it calculates what you want, of course, for the E-Modulus, for example, or the compressive strength. And these two modes, E-Modulus and compressive strength, are a bit more difficult than the others. So I will explain how they work. So for the compressive strength mode, we will first need to import a conversion curve of the type of stone that you are measuring. For me, I made 5 types of conversion curves here. Then when you choose it, this button we don't use it, and I will explain later why. And here you choose the distance of your sample. So if you made a measure, you will see when you choose the manual cursor that there is a range of velocity where you don't have a result. It is because of the way that you made your conversion curve, and I will explain later. You see here that in this range we have a result of compressive strength. Also notice that for this mode of measure, you have to connect only P-wave transducer, because it don't work with S-wave transducer. And finally, the most complicated mode, the E-Modulus mode, where you need to know the density of your material. You can choose it, for example, I don't know, here. And again, the distance of the sample. And you will need to make a first measure with the P-wave transducer. Then you stop the measure, you place the cursor at the beginning of the wave, of the P-wave. Then you change with this button to S-wave transducer and make another measure and place the cursor of S-wave, and you have then the E-Modulus here. So now if I want to measure the transmission time of the P-wave velocity, so now if I want to measure the transmission time of the P-wave in this sample, I put the sample here. If I am alone, I click on this button, so it will stop the measure when the signal will be stable. So I click here to start the signal. Here it was stable, so it saved the measure in the folder that I've chose before. Notice that for distance and pulse velocity and also compressive strength, it's exactly the same manipulation. You just have to put here, and when it's saved, you have the measure saved and you have also the result here. So now for S-wave, if you want to measure a sample like that, it is the same that's for the P-wave, but there is one thing that's changed. So I want here to measure. Always be careful of the direction of the cables. And here you can see that it saved one time the measure, but I can stop also if I am alone. And then here you see that the automatically cursor puts himself at the beginning of the S wave, like for the P wave, but it is not where we want to put it. You have to put the cursor, so you change to manual cursor, on the first significative negative slope, here, at the cross of the axis of 0 and the first negative slope. And now you have your transmission time of S wave. So now for the E-Modulus mode, it is a bit complicated. So when you choose the distance of your sample and its density, you will have first to measure with the P-wave transducer. So if you are alone, again, you click on this button so it will stop the measure. You click here. Now it stopped the measure, so I will put the P cursor on the beginning of the P wave here. Now that it is done, you have to change transducers by clicking here and choosing the transducer you will use. So of course the S-wave transducer, because for the E-Modulus you need an S-wave and the P-wave. Now that you have your S-wave transducer connected and that you chose the S-wave transducer, you can start the measure. So be careful on the axis you are measuring. So if I was measuring like that with the P-wave, I will measure like that with the S-wave, and also be aware of getting the cables on the same way. So when you are alone, it's most simple to measure like that with the S transducers, but if you are two, you can use your two hands, of course. So now I can click on the button. It will start the wave. So because I have another hand, I can stop it alone. So now that I stopped the measure of the S wave, I can put the cursor not on the beginning of the S wave, but like I said before, in this point. And now you have the E-Modulus that is gave in function of the density you put, the distance you put, and of course the velocity of the P wave and the S wave. Notice that you can also, by only measuring the velocity of the P wave and the S wave, calculate the E-Modulus with the formula, but in our case, this instrument is better because only by measuring P wave and S wave, you got directly the E-Modulus. So to create a conversion curve for the mode of measure compressive strength, you have to download this software PL-link that you can find on the internet site of ProSiC. So you will have to connect your Pundit to your computer, and then you can open the software PL-link. So in my case, this software helped me to create conversion curves and import the data that I measured with the Pundit on my computer to make Excels. So first, you have to click here to connect your Pundit to the software. You select the communication type USB, and then it found Pundit, so now the Pundit is connected and you have access to all the data that you've saved on your Pundit. For example, if I want to select these data, I select all and I download. So you have all the data with their information. So you can save them as a project. You have to select them and save as a project if you want to go back to this data later. Or you can also save it as a picture or save as an Excel. So once you select them, you export. For example, here, you named it, and it is saved. So here I have what I've saved. I click to open it, and now you have information about your device when you made your measure, for example, Pundit and the serial number, etc. And then you have all your measure with all the information. For example, the measure type was compressive strength. You have the result, the name of your files, the date here, and all the others information. Don't forget to save this file as an Excel, because here it is Unicode text. So now we know how to import your data of your Pundit on your computer, but the most important in this software is that it can create conversion curves. So you have to click on device, click on conversion curves, and you can upload and download conversion curves. So these are the curves that I made on the computer, and these are the curves on the device. So you can see that they are the same because I already import them. So if you want to import a curve, you click on the right click, and here you can delete it or copy to device, or here copy to computer or delete it from the Pundit. If you want to create a new curve, you go again on conversion curves, and here you can create, edit or view curves. For example, I want to view the curve that I made here, but I can also edit here the range or the expression of the curve and save it. And if I want to make a new curve, I click on create curve. So to make a conversion curve, you have, so first to give it a name, and you have then to choose a curve type. You have three types: polynomial, exponential, and SUNREB. So here you have the function, the expression of the function of the three types. In my case, I used SUNREB. This is an expression that used the velocity and what they called rebound. In my case, I didn't make measure of rebound, so I just have to put the value C to 0, and the rebound will be always 1 on the formula. You can see when you want to view one of the curves that I made, that here there is a value of the rebound. It is a value that you can change on the Pundit, but for us it doesn't matter because the C value was 0, so the R will always be 1. So in our case, we have an expression that looks like A times V exponent B, and that is what I made on my Excel with the experimental values that I've made. Here you have the curve, and here the expression that I put on the PL-Link software. Don't mind here the S velocity or here S velocity, because remind that to make a conversion curve, it is always with P velocity on this axis and compressive strength on this axis. So you have to make experimental measures with an hydraulic press or a press in general to have the values in this axis. Once you choose the values of your function and the curve type and the name, you have to choose a range. So if I want to create a new curve, here I called it something, I choose the curve type, for us Sunweb, I put my values, and here you have to choose a range. So be careful, because if you measure a sample with a velocity that is not in the range, it will not give you a compressive strength back. So you have to choose a long range of velocity in relation to the sample you will measure. For example, here I saw that for the Ontoria samples, the range of velocity was never more than this and never less than this. So I can choose it, and now I am sure that when I will measure a sample of Ontoria stone, the velocity will always be between here and between here, so I will always have a compressive strength. Because if I measure something that has a velocity of 2000, for example, I will not have a result of compressive strength. So to resume, with this software, you can download the measure that you made on your Pundit, or you can create conversion curve and download them on the Pundit to make measure of compressive strength. So to resume, the most important thing that I learned by using the Pundit is to always create a folder and select this folder before saving the file you want. Also, when you turn on the Pundit, always zeroing your transducer, and if you change the transducer, always zeroing it again. But when you are making a measure of E-Modulus, you can't zeroing your transducer between your two measures of with the transducer P and the transducer S. Also, when you have a signal with the S transducer, be careful to always put the cursor on the first negative curve. If you are alone, don't forget that with this button here, you can stop the measure when the signal is stable. Also, when you make a measure of E-Modulus, don't forget to always start with the P transducer, then you stop the measure, then you change with this button, then you connect the S transducer, make the measure with the S transducer to make a good measure of E-Modulus. And when you are making compressive strength measure, make sure that when you made the conversion curve, the range is well chosen, because if you go too far, here you will not have a measure. And also, always do compressive strength measure with P transducer, because with S transducer, it doesn't work. So when you want to make a conversion curve here on the software PL link, always remember to make it with the P velocities and the compressive strength that you measured with an hydraulic press or something like that. If you made a mistake on the parameters you choose when you make a measure, for example, on the density on the distance of your sample, this doesn't matter, because when you go to the Explorer, you choose on your folder what you measure, and on the measure, here you can change again the parameters you choose before. For the voltage and for the gain and other parameters, you can't change it, but here you can always change the comments, the file name, so these parameters too, and also you can change where you place the cursor if it wasn't well placed. For example, if I made here, if I placed my cursor here, I can change and replace it on the right position. Don't forget, when you change parameters like that on your file, always save it to save the change you made.